something strange in your neighborhood. Who you gonna call?
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We are here to talk Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. I'm here with Steven. Welcome. We have both gone and seen the movie in theaters on day one. And I am a huge fan of the Ghostbusters franchise. So, like, fair warning there. Steven, you're more new to it.
Well, I watched 1 and 2 growing up, and I remember loving them. And then on rewatch, I don't think they held up as much. And I don't have the same like nostalgic glasses for it that like I would for maybe Back to the Future, though those are probably better movies anyways. And I think part of it is just Ghostbusters can get more dated because of the way the CGI is versus some of the other older movies. But I like the franchise. I don't have a problem with it. The songs are the best.
Yeah, you recently watched Afterlife, which is the setup to this. Like, Afterlife is a return to the main like storyline and timeline of this franchise after kind of taking a detour with the 2016 movie. So this movie, Frozen Empire, is a direct sequel to Afterlife. And it does have the benefit of going back to New York City, back to the firehouse, all of those things. We open with actually a really cool sequence we'll get to in a second, but the Ghostbusters of old, the original cast minus Harold Ramis, who sadly passed away in 2014, are all here, right? So we don't have Sigourney Weaver or Rick Moranis, but everyone else is present and accounted for and actually has a sizable role in the movie, especially Dan Aykroyd. So they're back, all of that. But the stars of this movie are still the new cast. McKenna Grace, Paul Rudd, Finn Wolfhard, etc. So we open, Steven, in New York City, but in like the opening years of the 20th century. So we're going back in time. I thought this was a pretty cool sequence. It kind of showed the beginnings of where this power comes from, this orb that becomes like the centerpiece of this movie. And it actually showed me right away, too, that we're going to up the game a little bit from a CGI standpoint from Afterlife as well. Even though Afterlife was great in that regard, I think we did more here. What did you think of that open? Did you like it?
Oh, I did really like it. It was super interesting. And then seeing the firemen go up to the door and the ghost goes through, so you know something's happening in there. And then his hand like freezes on the door.
Yeah, hand on the door because they're firemen, right? So hand on the door is like it's hot, but instead it's freezing cold.
Yeah,
and his hand actually starts to freeze, so they yank him away from the door, etc.
Yeah, no, it was interesting. It definitely set the tone or the stakes for the movie, or like what was going to happen, and it was a nice little intro. Like the intro was very good and very well shot.
Yeah. So all this unfolds now. We come back to present time. We kick off right away with like capturing a ghost with a car chase, essentially through the streets of Manhattan with Paul Rudd driving. Finn Wolfhard's Trevor mad that he's not driving because he's 18 now. And that was his storyline throughout the movie. One of the things that I didn't necessarily love, but that's that. And, Trevor and Phoebe's mother there as well. So the gang's all there in the car. The cool, like, seat that goes outside the door. I love that addition to Ecto 1 in Afterlife, still here. So we also get the drone capture device to bring in this like sewer monster. So a cool open. I thought it was fun. The ghosts in Ghostbusters, Steven, are like, they're not scary, right? Like they're ghosts, but it's not like a horror movie. So it is kid friendly. And we kick into the main story where we get, we learn of a new threat. This god that freezes everything, and people like are scared to death. Essentially, the last thing you see is your tear ducts freezing, and all that stuff. So the New York City starts to freeze in the middle of July in like a sweltering summer, and the Ghostbusters are called upon to save the day once again. So it leads up to this like climactic battle that has the old and new crew together fighting evil and all of this stuff. So that's her general story. It's really that. Like, there's not a lot more to it than that. But along the way, some other character work happening. So let's talk cast and just general plot for each character. So which one stood out to you? Like, which characters' arcs here? Because the focus in Afterlife was McKenna Grace's Phoebe, for the most part. That kind of stays true here.
It does continue. Though she's definitely been... like, had her legs kicked out from underneath her from the first
nerfed,
movie.
Essentially.
Yeah. And it's like, how are you going to do that in the sequel? They went very cliche and storytelling with her, and it was very unfortunate because I loved Phoebe Spangler and McKenna Grace's portrayal of her in the first movie. Like, I thought she was a very dynamic character, and an interesting character that, you know, eschewed the typical cliche type character for smarty pants, like high school teenager scientist girl.
Mm-hmm.
But this one, she fell back into like, I've been benched, and they mention it like 4 times. And it just was not good. And I feel bad because I feel like she was capable of more. She's a better actress than what they gave her. And the storyline could have been much better surrounding her. And so that was kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, what I loved in Afterlife was that she was essentially her, you know, her grandfather, right? Like, she was that, very much that character. She had so many of those traits that Egon had when he was alive in the first 2 movies. So it was cool to see that, and all that is sort of taken away, and in its place we kind of have like teenage drama brought in.
Yeah.
So that is a little disappointing, but it is the vehicle for her meeting like a ghost teenage girl where they, you know, Phoebe starts to feel like this ghost is the only person who gets me and all that type of thing. Turns out ghost female is working for the evil god and is, you know, using Phoebe to bring about the end of the world and all of this.
And the least shocking twist of all time. And that's what I mean. It could have been better.
A lot of things with this movie could have been better, sadly, and I say that as a big fan of the franchise, but I don't think many character arcs here were really all that fulfilling for me. You know, Paul Rudd I thought was good, but his biggest like dilemma was, how can I hold the kids accountable? You know, like, that was his arc.
And I feel like they could have explored that more, because I think it is an interesting arc to tell, and I don't think it's done with, like, you know, you get the typical cliche story where the step-parent comes in and is just kind of an asshole. And they try to, like, play off that, you know, and they make jokes about it. And I do think those jokes were a little funny. I do like Paul Rudd and Carrie Coon interact together quite well. They have chemistry on, and they felt like a real, like, match. And so they could have explored it a little more in depth. And they didn't, and that was kind of unfortunate. I think this movie suffered from trying to have too many characters. It's almost like what happens in, you know, the Marvel movies, where like Eternals, and I bring that up because of Kumail Nanjiani.
Who was fun in this, by the way.
I liked his character arc. He was probably the best one. Him or Ray. Ray Stansfield, Dan Aykroyd's character arc was interesting. He was, I think, trying to find his place in the post-Ghostbusters, like post-active Ghostbusters world has been hard for him in the universe. And so I liked kind of what they did with him.
It was a nice parallel. In my opinion, Ray is the heart of this movie. And I like the parallel between Ray and Phoebe both having this thing taken away from them, that for different reasons. You know, Ray, because of age, he's retired and all these things, but he still feels the pull to it. There's actually a really nice scene between him and Ernie Hudson's character where Winston, where they talk about, you know, Winston's like, you know, it's your golden years, go do things, whatever. And Ray's like, this is how I want to spend my golden years. This is what I love, you know? So he feels that pull back to it at all times. By the way, interesting to see Winston now, like a full-on philanthropist, like rich guy. He was like just the extra Ghostbuster at one time. And now he's like bankrolling the whole deal, including a secret research lab, Steven, where like the Ghostbusters crew isn't even informed. Like they're not on a need to know basis about the Ghostbusters research lab until we reach a certain point.
And that was another cliche where, of course, that is like a negative. It ends up with some of the ghosts breaking out, and how the big bad got released. So that's the unfortunate thing. I feel like
the biggest cliche was that we found really creative ways and just very convenient ways to get all of the characters from the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, to Manhattan for the sequel. Including podcast, and I can't remember the other character's name. I apologize.
Oh shoot, I have it. Lucky Domingo.
There you go, Lucky. Yeah. So she's also there on an internship. Like she just happened to be the person, right, for the internship, and great. So they're all there.
See, it's funny. I was okay with both those because, like, I bought podcast and Ray like hit it off in the first movie. I was like, "You're my one listener," and that was funny.
You're my listener.
And the first movie, I mean, Afterlife. Podcast, my favorite character from Afterlife. Not as funny when he is a little bit older. I think that personality doesn't work quite as well at the 15, 16-year-old that it did when he was like 10 or 11 in the first movie. And like maybe better writing could have saved that, which sucked because I loved Podcast in Afterlife.
He was a great character in that movie. Would you be Podcast's second listener?
Probably.
Yeah. So,
that's
weird
funny.
thing to me here is like, I really like parts of this movie, but like it feels really disjointed throughout. It feels like a collection of moments rather than an actual story that furthers a lot of these characters. And one of the things that stands out to me there, Steven, is like Bill Murray is the foundation, the cornerstone, the anchor of this like franchise in many ways. He's the most recognizable name attached to it. Always has been. But here I feel like he's just there to be there. I don't feel like he has anything meaningful to do here. Really. Like, that we just throw in that callback scene to the very first movie, right? With the whole, like, bowl on the head that, like, does all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that's really shoehorned in, like, just out of nowhere. It's like, we need to get Bill Murray in before the third act. So, here he is. Say hi to Venkman. So, I mean, it does have consequence, because that's where we learn the whole, like, Fire Master thing, right? Because the more upset he gets, the fire shoots up and all of that. But still, it did feel shoehorned into me, and it just felt like, oh, there's Bill Murray, hi. And then at the end, he's just there cracking jokes, you know?
And I think they kind of, like, I don't even want to say wrote themselves into a corner, because I don't necessarily feel like there was a good way out of it if Bill Murray does not want to be like a main actor in this movie, like it felt like Winston and or Ernie Hudson and Dan Aykroyd did. And so he appeared in the first like in Afterlife as the cameo. All three of them basically did. Though Dan Aykroyd again was in for a little bit more,
couple scenes,
and so now it was like. It would have been weird to not have him there. I mean, we talked on the Star Wars show, multiple times about like these big bad characters in the world. Where is Luke and all of them? This is where the problem is. So that's the issue: is where is Bill Murray and Dr. Venkman when the other two are there fighting? Because they would be helping. And so I'm okay with him not really having much to do, playing off that spaghetti pot helmet thing. I'm maybe not as negative on it as and I'm not even saying you're negative. I'm just
indifferent to it. I didn't think it added anything. It was just like, oh, let's get Bill Murray in before the third act, because he's going to show up to help, right? Like that's going to happen. But we got to get him in before that this time, so it's not just like rolling in, at high noon, so to speak. But for fans who don't know, like one of the reasons the franchise was on hold for so long between 89 and ultimately 2021 for this timeline was that Bill Murray refused to be in another movie.
Yeah.
So, finally got him back as a cameo, and then to do a little bit more this time around. And a lot of actors come around to that like later in their career, right? Like they come back to some of the defining roles that they've had, and we've seen that quite a bit. Harrison Ford, etc., in recent years. But I don't know. I feel like it's nice to see all the old gang on screen again, but I would like to see more of a centerpiece put on the new crew, especially Phoebe, because I feel like she is the centerpiece of the new Ghostbusters, and I feel like just when she's about to take over and command the screen, it doesn't quite get there.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I saw someone in another review say that like it was both directors were fighting each other to figure out, or both writers were fighting each other to figure out which story they wanted to tell. And I definitely think that is very accurate way to describe this. And like I said, they kind of undercut Afterlife too, because Phoebe showed herself as this strong character there, and now she's weak and doesn't know what to do. And one of my favorite scenes in this movie led to one of my least favorite scenes in this movie. My favorite being when they went to like explore the language, and they went to visit Patton Oswalt at the library.
Who was outstanding in a short role, by the way, but yeah.
Oh yes. And then there was the joke about like Ray being banned from the library and then just going in anyways. Hilarious stuff. There's also a callback to Ghostbusters 1 with the library ghost and Dan. That was a great bit, and I would have been fine if they kept that up, like them sneaking around. But then all of a sudden, like, it leads into the police station where they meet the mayor, or that might have been the second. No, I can't remember if that was the first or second time. But then William Atherton comes back. Now he's the mayor, Walter Peck. He's for those that don't remember, the EPA from the first movie and the mayor assistant from the second. And he's just as bad as always. But then Winston comes in and is like yelling at them and doesn't believe Ray about the ghost and stuff. And that just made me just so mad. I mean, not actual like mad, but like just, it was so unbelievable. Like, dude, you've been fighting ghosts before in your life. Why do you not believe that this happened? That just felt unbelievable.
You've known Ray for 40 years.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, like that, it got me too. And I think what got me even more, Stephen, was like, we see Winston now as the business owner and investor. Like, that's how I kind of took that at that moment. But then all of a sudden we get to the third act and all of a sudden, boom, he's fighting ghosts again. Let's go. Yeah. And so it was just like a really weird thing for that character.
They did not know what to do with him.
They were just trying to manufacture conflict outside of like just the evil like spirits and whatnot. And I feel like they just struggled. And I love what you said there about the writers just having conflicting stories they wanted to tell, because it really did feel like that at times. I also think I wanted to ask you, like, do you like the amount of callbacks we had or like fan service? Do you think it was too heavy? I mean, I don't think we can make a case that it was too light. But where were you at with some of that?
So I thought Afterlife was a brilliant way to reboot like a franchise or start it back over. Like, there was enough callbacks and enough cameos, but the main characters got to stand on their own. And it didn't feel like, when you look at like episode 7, that is like a shot for shot remake of episode 4. And talk about Star Wars. Mostly, yeah. But even though they're facing the same bad guy in Afterlife with the same sort of the dogs and the gatekeeper and the keymaster, it felt different. Like the story.
It all felt new.
Yeah. And so
it felt like it had this weight to it that, like, stakes were really high and like you cared. I was invested personally in all the characters in Afterlife. I didn't feel the same yesterday when I watched this.
This felt, it felt a little bit, maybe a little too heavy with the cameos. The William Atherton one, again, you also live in the city. You've seen the ghosts firsthand multiple times, and why are you so anti-Ghostbusters? That just doesn't make sense. They had to find a way to get the Stay Puft Men back, but I was okay with that because I love the Stay Puft Marshmallow Men, and they were just as funny and adorable in this movie as they were in the first one. And And then like I said, the library ghost was good. I thought that was fun for Ray, and a fun little, like, you could very easily miss that if you hadn't seen the first Ghostbusters in a while.
Yeah.
So I don't feel like it was maybe too heavy-handed. Maybe it was definitely more than the first movie, but not horrible.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you, but I'm going to say something else. I didn't think I'd say this going into this movie, but one of the things, like, at first about Afterlife, like going into Afterlife, that I didn't love as a Ghostbusters fan is that we were going out in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma. But I think that gave a lot of freedom to tell a story. And going back to New York here, I think put some handcuffs on with a lot of things that it just felt like some story beats had to be there, like the pack and all of that, right? And that whole... And William Atherton, love him. He's great in the role, and it's fun. It's just... It feels like we're a little too constrained by trying to pay homage to what was, whereas I thought in Afterlife, they did a really good job of doing that just very naturally throughout.
Yeah, and I do feel like there was a story easily to tell here, because putting a bunch of ghosts inside that cage... At some point, they're going to run out of room. I thought that was an interesting... That was
a question I asked as a kid, by the way. Like, does it ever get full? And they finally answered it here. Turns out it does.
And so I think that they could have told a lot of the same story, just a little bit differently to make it better. I do think they got a little bit, maybe too nostalgia baity / had too many... And I actually think... this movie felt more like the issues Star Wars had with the old characters kind of taking over too much. Obviously, they weren't the main points, and I don't have a problem with Ray being in the movie. I actually liked him with the rest of the group, and trying to find what to do in the Golden Years. Again, I think that's an interesting story to tell. But you're right, like when Bill Murray appears just because Bill Murray like almost has to. What do you do there? So where do you go in the future? Because it seems like they're going to stay in New York. Where do you go from here?
I really thought one of the core characters was going to die in this movie. Like the legacy characters. I thought we were going to see a situation where like Bill Murray was going to do the Han Solo, give himself up to save everybody and go out with that noble moment, because Bill Murray has so long said he doesn't want to keep doing this, and maybe he's changed his tune now. I don't know. I feel like at this point, if you're going to do a third one, you've got to find a way to have these characters stand their own. I'm with you. I think Dan Aykroyd should have a role in this. Like, he is the heart of the Ghostbusters, at the end of the day. And there was a really interesting story to tell with him, and there was the best character work in this movie was done with his character, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But you've got to find a way to let these other characters stand on their own. Like, you've got a good young actor in Finn Wolfhard that's doing like nothing in this movie.
He did nothing.
So it's unfortunate.
And I think you had a story to tell with Melody too, like what the perspective of these ghosts are.
Yes.
That is just missing. Like when you think of like Men in Black and kind of the aliens and they have their own stories and lives and that's interesting. I feel like maybe I'm looking at this too deeply here, but
so because they're trying to tell a story like that, but they just come up short.
Yeah, and I think that is definitely the case. So like again, it was just too many things, and I think you could have very easily explored the like morality / ethics of with Phoebe and Melody's interaction without doing the cliched bit. But I think they needed to find a way to figure out how to bring Iceman back, and that was the way they were going to do it.
Yep. And I'm okay with all of that. I think it's a great call out to bring up Men in Black, by the way, because that's a really great example of a movie very much in this genre that is also right around that like slightly under 2 hour mark, for those movies. Yeah. That is still, even though it's a fast paced, quick, crisp story, it can still like have good character development and get you invested. That Men in Black did that. This one didn't as well for me. So that's where it falls short. I do want to bring up one scene that was like It made me laugh, and it was my favorite scene in the movie. And it's really inconsequential, but I thought it was great. Dan Aykroyd scene when he's filming a YouTube video, and he's like struggling with the whole like, make sure you like and subscribe. I thought it was great. And like Podcast is right there next to him whispering like and subscribe, and all that. Yeah.
And then they like check the watch, and then they hit it with the hammer and just like crush it. That whole bit was funny.
Yeah, and you got the old lady. She's like, "Oh, are you there?" She's her husband's name, whatever it was. Are you there? Are you there? And it's like, no, bam, we're gonna smash this thing to pieces. And he's like, "Sorry, lady, the hammer gets the views."
That was good.
So that was fun. That is Ghostbusters at its best, by the way. Scenes like that. That add to the characters, make you laugh, all of that. Like it's just fun.
Also, I'd be remiss if I don't bring up that they just completely wasted. I know you talked about wasting Finn Wolfhard, and I would agree. They also wasted James Acaster. He is my favorite comedian by a long shot. He has 4 specials on Netflix, highly worth watching. And then I love him whenever he appears on 8 out of 10 Cats Does Countdown. The game show in Britain, and he just was not a funny character in here. And I'm not going to say if he wanted to do a serious character, fine, but like this is one of his first movies, I wanted to see the humor, and he wasn't. There was like
plus, how many serious characters are in Ghostbusters? Come on,
and that's the thing. Like the only serious character is the bad guy, William Atherton,
right? And even he's like comedically evil, it's like so over the top. It's just absurd. I'm with you. And he was actually in the movie a lot until he wasn't. It was like all of a sudden he's just no longer really part of our story. So I don't know. I'm with you on that. I thought that, it was a good start, but, and I think we could have done more telling about this research facility, because some of the ghosts in there were actually pretty cool. The ghosts that jumps back and forth between objects and other things.
Yeah, well, don't forget the super scary one that almost breaks through the glass that was hinted at, and I thought was going to escape a few times and then doesn't. I do think there's room to tell on that, and I think they could have told a little bit different story. And I hope if they stay in New York for the new one, I hope it is focused on the ghosts in the research facility. Because I think that would be a more interesting story to tell. Also, I hope Patton Oswalt sticks around, even if it's just in mini roles, because I very much enjoyed his historical knowledge type. I believe in all of these lore things. That was fun. And Kumail Nanjiani's character Nadim was also great. I
hope he sticks around too. And is in.
He was funny.
I don't know if he will, but it seems like the type of character that might just be like a one-off. But I wouldn't mind seeing him hang around.
Yeah, he probably had my favorite scenes, like the funniest scenes in the movie, I think. And so I enjoyed it. I liked this movie. I enjoyed watching it. I just don't necessarily like it as much as I liked Afterlife, which I really liked a lot.
It's weird because when I think about as a fan of Ghostbusters, did I enjoy myself going to the theater and watching this movie? Yes. Is it my favorite? No. Is it in the top half for me? Man, I don't know. Probably not. So it's hard because as a fan, I'm into it. As somebody's is this a good Ghostbusters movie? I'm I don't know. I do feel like it's a step down from Afterlife for sure. So
yeah, it's a popcorn flick.
Yeah, basically. With that, it feels like this should be a May movie in March. It just like a movie that comes out middle of May. Yeah, heading that season, but it's in March and whatever. It's cool. It did get delayed. I think this was originally supposed to be last December, but I think because of the strike, it got delayed so they could do full publicity and all that.
It would have worked as a December movie, I think. Just a fun little Christmas
well, especially because you freeze all of New York. It's winter. I figured you, being the Day After Tomorrow fan you are, would love that and look for.
I do love the Frozen part. It's something about Ice Ages just are interesting to me. As a it's so easy to do fire and brimstone and burning everything alive, but I like the freezing bit.
Me too. The scene, by the way, before we give this thing a score and get out of here, the scene where the cold front essentially rolls into the city from the beach and all of that is really cool. And it's kind of ruined because it's in the preview, in the trailer.
That's why I don't watch previews, Tyler.
Yeah, I know. But it's part of our gig. We got to do it sometimes.
I know.
I wish I could say that's the only reason. It's because I get hyped for these things and I want to see as much as I can. So I do it to myself. But it comes in and it's a really cool scene. It's really well done. The CGI is great. And yeah, it's fun. So
it's so funny because like when I viewed that scene, I didn't view it that same way because I'm like, of course, all of these icicles are missing every single person.
Oh, me too. I was waiting for like blood splatter to be heading everywhere and everything, right? But yeah,
I know that is not this franchise, and so like, but like the real, like I couldn't turn that real part of my brain off. Like, why is this guy's supposed to kill everybody, and he's like, and these people are running away as these. It's just so it's kind of funny. In an unintentional way.
You had just earlier watched a giant spectral sewer monster fly through Manhattan and then catch it with a drone capture device. So,
That's true. That's true.
If that didn't ruin the, realism for you, I don't think this would either. So, okay, let's give this thing a score. So we, going in, we agreed on a score, and I think, Ghostbusters Afterlife has a lot of fun, or not Afterlife, Frozen Empire. Has a lot of fun elements to it. It's not as good as Afterlife, in my opinion. I think Afterlife, I have it as a solid second in the franchise. Steven, I think it's actually your favorite.
It is my favorite, but I think when we do our tier ranking this week, I think it only benefit, like, you can't put it before Ghostbusters 1 because a lot of it wouldn't work before if Ghostbusters 1 wasn't a thing. But yeah, I love Afterlife. It was fun.
This movie just doesn't hold up to Afterlife as much, but that doesn't mean it's not a worthwhile watch for a fan of the franchise. It is. Yeah. You're going to have fun with this. Yeah, just don't look for the impactful story that's like quite as touching or as good as Afterlife. And that's okay. Like, not all sequels need to be that. Some just should be fun. And this one is. But it's a 6 for us. We're going to give it a 6 out of 10. Because it is missing some of those elements. It feels at times more of a collection of moments than a cohesive, like, really good story. And like when we got to the third act, I didn't feel like the stakes were all that high. I was more just feeling like, oh, we're going to see how they beat the monster now. That's kind of where I was at the end.
Yeah, it only felt a little high because of Dr. Hubert Wartsky's like saying the stakes were high when he was explaining this the lore of that god. But yes, I'm with you. When the actual came down to the fight, the stakes felt quite low.
Yeah. By the way, nice touch opening with a Robert Frost poem. And it was a really good selection too for where they were going with the story. So very un-Ghostbusters, by the way, to like go, I think I shouldn't say that. I think they've done it before, but it was a weird, interesting touch to see that done. Okay, let's get out of here. Ultimately, we recommend it. If you're a fan of the series, go see it. You'll enjoy it. Just don't look for something maybe that you consider as one of the absolute best in the series. So, like Steven said, on our podcast next week, the Strangely Awesome Gamescast, we will be doing a tier ranking list of all the Ghostbusters movies, including the 2016 one. All of your favorites out there, I know that. But until then, go watch Frozen Empire, subscribe, do all that fun stuff here. I can't say it quite as awkwardly as Dan Aykroyd. I wish I could, but do all that stuff and comment. Let us know what you thought of Frozen Empire 2. Okay. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.